let's get into it. There are many arguments that Anos fans will like to make, so for the sake of this video, I'm only going to be going over the common arguments that they make, so whatever esoteric secret argument that I'm not aware of that's deep within the fandom, I'm not going to cover that. The main argument for Anos is that he has a sword called Venice de Noah, which has the ability to destroy anything regardless of how infinite or eternal it is. People will use this argument to say that this makes Anos one of the strongest characters in all of fiction since he can destroy concepts, his power is limitless, yada yada yada. But this gets debunked by the series themselves, so I'll just go over why this is false. It's outright confirmed that Venice de Noah is not even the strongest sword that Anos has, so therefore it can't be limitless in nature. Another way you can debunk it is the fact that spatio-temporal limits can be applied to Venice de Noah. To explain that Venice de Noah can only be used near the Castle of Desolgate, meaning it's limited by space. It's also limited by time, as the Castle of Desolgate summoning spell can only last for 5 minutes. But anyways, this would just outright debunk the limitless nature of Venice de Noah, since if it could destroy its own limits, it wouldn't be limited to them in the first place. Now, someone might point out that Venice de Noah has been used without the need to summon the Castle of Desolgate, but this completely misses the argument entirely. I can agree that Venice de Noah can exist independently from the Castle of Desolgate. That doesn't debunk shit. The point is that if you can apply spatio-temporal limits to something, then it isn't limitless. A limitless being, by definition, makes it so that limits are completely inapplicable to said thing. To truly be limitless, it must have the maximally greatest power, something that is completely unchanging, something that is not dependent on circumstances. This sword does not meet that criteria. These circumstances are also logical properties being applied to the sword. The worst of the worst is the fact that the sword is used on Anos himself and it doesn't kill him. If it cannot destroy Anos, it cannot destroy anything. Desolgate limiting Venice de Noah would also imply that Venice de Noah cannot destroy the Castle of Desolgate, which is something I already emphasized earlier in this video, but if it can destroy Desolgate, it would also destroy the limitations that Desolgate imposes on it. The sword can also be nullified, which implies that anything that is stronger than the sword cannot be erased by the sword. So overall, the sword Venice de Noah has plenty of limitations established by the verse, which would overall contradict its absolute nature, ultimately proving that the statements said about the sword are entirely hyperbolic and shouldn't be used for scaling. This is also a fallacy of contextimony that these Anos fans love using because they're actually taking the semantics of logic and reason out of context. When they talk about logic or basically reasoning within the misfit verse, they are not talking about something relating to classical logic or the laws of logic. Instead, when they talk about logic, it's just referring to the world's order or the order of the gods. There are several statements to indicate that this is the case. Exhibit A, direct statement confirming the gods have a quote-unquote bad habit for declaring themselves the reason of the world. Exhibit B, a conversation that is not about philosophy, but rather a conversation about the world, about order and magic, with them being outside the bounds of reason, which is why they are removed from the world's order. Exhibit C further emphasizes Exhibit B, as it's also yet again talking about being beyond the world's reason, and this reason being a fact on why the gods target him. Anos is directly defined as a misfit for the reason of not fitting within the constraints of the world's logic. Now, this really begs the question, what is the world's logic? What is the order of the gods? Well, they actually represent the laws of physics, which I'm not gonna lie, if you're going to compare Anos to literal multiversal entities, being beyond the laws of physics is the average fucking cakewalk. The next thing I want to go over is the Silver Sea scaling, which I also repeated in my Relevancy League video, but it's time for me to feel a little more in-depth about this. So people believe the Silver Seas is this infinite dimensional hierarchy that Anos can destroy, and sadly to say, this is not an infinite dimensional hierarchy. People are just taking the term dimension out of context. In the Misfit verse, the way it's being used is talking about how each level of the Silver Seas is even stronger than the last. There are several ways to understand why. When people talk about a new dimension, it could also just be talking about a new level or a new domain that's nothing like ever seen before. For example, if you learn something new within education, it's a whole new dimension of understanding that you yourself have unlocked. But we're not gonna say we're higher dimensional beings. Dimension is used all the time in several different meanings. Anyways, back to the Misfit verse, it's explained that this world is physically below the smaller world, which directly contradicts a higher dimensional transcendence because a higher dimension completely exists outside of the spatial expanse of the third dimension. But no, it's physically lower. It's also explained that power, speed, toughness, and magic power are all in another dimension, as in they're even stronger than before, which is elaborated in the exact same statement, which points out that you would not be able to destroy a single ship within these lower levels, and yet in these higher levels, you can destroy entire worlds. It's literally just talking about an enhanced level of strength, not a higher dimensional transcendence. Like, I don't even know how people get confused. Some of these statements are just blatantly in your face. Even if you didn't read the novels, you would easily be able to understand the context right in front of you. This is monkey brain levels of debunking. People will then try to argue that Anos scales to the time god, and the time god is going to represent the concept of time, and Anos can beat this time god, so therefore, this is going to be indicative of some sort of outerversal transcendence. But this argument is false because we know that since the gods embody the laws of physics, or they represent the laws of physics, this is just going to be more plausibly in context to the fourth dimension, which is how physicists view time. So no, Anos is not outerversal. People will also try to argue that there are an infinite amount of bubbles within the verse, and these bubbles are going to be somewhat representing a universe, or basically overall encompassing the concept of a multiverse. Except we clearly know that the term countless does not always have to be literal. But within classical language, countless doesn't necessarily have to be used to refer to some state of mathematical infinity. It could also just be talking about a very large or very great quantity. If the term bubble isn't just used as a name, but is actually meant to represent what the shape of these realms appear as, this would actually contradict these bubbles being infinite in expanse, as something spherical cannot have an infinite radius, because then they wouldn't be spatially enclosed into a sphere. People will also try to argue that Anos' eyes of destruction are absolute in nature, but they are also not absolute in nature. It's limited by the ability to see the opponent or to see said thing, so if the eyes of destruction cannot see the target it's trying to destroy, then it cannot destroy it. This would also mean the eyes of destruction are bounded to the concept of distance and perception, and since since it wouldn't be able to destroy those two concepts, it would mean that it's not absolute. There's also different types of eyes that serve different mechanisms throughout the series, which would be completely meaningless if the eyes of destruction have the power to create. And by the way, if you disagree that the eyes of destruction have the power to create things, you would be denying that it has an absolute nature, because it would just destroy the limitation of not being able to create things. The existence of the eyes of creation would just cause a redundancy with the eyes of destruction if the eyes of destruction were absolute in nature. There is no point in distinguishing these two things if it was absolute, because the eyes of destruction would be both the eyes of destruction and the eyes of creation at the exact same time. Now, the main problem with people trying to give characters absolute abilities is that they're extremely paradoxical within a cross-verse scenario. Let me break it down for people who don't understand. So let's say I have Series A being put against Series B, and I get two characters from those series. Character A can defeat anyone, and character B can never be defeated. If the two of these beings from their respective franchises were to fight, it would cause a logical contradiction, which is why absolute hacks cannot exist in a fictional cross-verse scenario. Now, I do agree it's available for a character to be boundless in fiction, but there needs to be a lot of context, and there does need to be a lot of criteria in order to fall under this said definition, so let me make that very clear. Certain wikis do try to find a way to fit the definition of boundless, so yeah, do what you will with that. Anyway, that's all I got for this video. If you guys want to discuss or debate with my community on power scaling, you can join the Discord server, link in bio. Until then, see ya.
So he claimed Anos used limited time to summon Vensdenua, huh? That's just a magic issue, not spatial temporal axis stuff. Here in the novel, he walked in a realm where time sequence was removed. In that case, Anos limiting his weapons isn't about spatial things, it's aspatial. Okay, now here's Zeta's ugliest argument. So Anos limits himself so he doesn't destroy the universe, okay. The gods are order, also absolute, like in the chapter where the past can't be changed or it'll break the universe. So the mystic eye of chaotic destruction is a type of eye that destroys conditions, space, logic, and destiny, you see. Anos limits himself just so he doesn't annihilate everything. So Zeta, you were ignorant of this. If someone limits themselves, obviously they fear their own power might bring destruction. That doesn't mean Anos is weak, okay. Your Goku will get erased if Anos uses power beyond his limits. Okay, now let me educate you, Zeta. I don't care about the Silver Sea case, but there are infinite possibilities that turn into reality or new worlds. And a world is infinite, as stated in scans, boundless. So there are infinite universes, and all of them exist inside single bubbles. Countless bubbles are ongoing multiverses. In that case, the many worlds interpretation is used. Anyway, let's move on to the world's hierarchy. So there are 10 shallow layers, 10 middle layers, and above them are deep layers. A character from a deep world can easily one-shot the chief god of a shallow world. And a chief god is the origin of a universe, you see. Also the living embodiment of their creation. So in this case, there's qualitative superiority among layers, okay. If there are infinite multiverses in layer 0, then a layer 2 character can easily destroy them, okay. So that explains the dimensional logic, where strength, speed, and all qualities exist on a completely different dimension. This term can be taken as philosophical. I mean, dimensions can represent even abstract existence like emotions, ideas, consciousness, whatever. So they're talking about power level, where a world's order becomes higher level if it gains depth of existence. I mean, the more nothingness they gain, the more powerful they become, okay. Now I'll debunk that asshole Zeta's worst claim, okay. So gods are orders, also binary opposition. Anyway, destruction and creation are natural duality, okay. If there's a beginning, then there's an ending, okay. Anos is the concept of chaos, you see. Gods are like makers of their scripts, which means they're like authors who enjoy the story. And you know what? Anos broke order. That means he's above script, laws, and dimensionality. I mean, spatio-temporal axis depends on its maker, so no laws about physics means no space or gravity, yes. So Anos can just destroy them easily. Whatever. Goku can't even touch Anos because he went outside the order of gods. And Zeta didn't debunk anything, just yapped. Whatever, last consolation. So there's a simple rule in scaling. If A transcends B, and B transcends C, then generally it transcends both B and C. In Anos's case, him putting limits on his spells doesn't mean he's weak, it just means he dislikes using his full power. And even at his limits, he can erase a monkey like Goku, because he already walked and used Vensdenua in a timeless reality. So his limits are beyond conventional time. Also, one more thing, we MGK scalers don't think Anos is the strongest character in fiction, but one of the strongest. That mid-level kid is lying. He didn't even read the novel, just blabbing nonsense. His allegations count as false dichotomy, I guess. He couldn't give any refutation or premises, I guess. Whatever. He's the worst scaler and debunker too. Whatever. Now this is for all you guys, hope you enjoy it, and like and subscribe, okay? Now, adios.